Something just happened that's never been seen before. 10 African nations stood up and said no to the United States. And not just any offer, but one directly from Donald Trump. Billions in aid, exclusive trade deals, and military alliances, all flatly rejected. Why? What made these countries risk it all to defy one of the world's most powerful leaders? In a move that's shaking up international politics, Africa just sent a message loud and clear. The old rules no longer apply, and what happens next could reshape the balance of global power forever. In early 2025, Donald Trump made what many called a bold pivot in U.S. foreign policy, extending a series of sweeping offers to African nations in a calculated effort to reassert American dominance on the continent. These offers weren't small. They were multi-billion-dollar packages including military backing, infrastructure loans, medical advancements, and trade incentives. But what happened next stunned the global stage. 10 African countries said no. At the heart of this backlash lies a deeper conflict, one about sovereignty, power, and the politics of partnership. Trump's offers, while polished with diplomacy, came with unspoken strings. Countries were told to cut ties with China, allow U.S. military bases on their soil, surrender control over natural resources, and even take positions on international conflicts that defy their national interest. From Ghana to Egypt, African leaders pushed back, exposing what they saw as a veiled attempt at neo-colonial control. This isn't just about one leader or one deal, it's about an entire continent refusing to be dictated to any longer. So, what drove these nations to take such a monumental risk? And what does this moment say about the future of Africa and global power itself? Let's break it down, country by country. Number 10. Ghana strings attached? We're not interested. Ghana, a beacon of Pan-African pride, made headlines when it turned down a $500 million U.S. aid package. The catch? It wasn't just about financial help. Trump's offer came with fine print. Ghana had to cut its growing economic ties with China and allow the U.S. military to operate strategic bases from its ports. For a nation that has fiercely guarded its independence, that demand was a red line. Ghanaian officials didn't mince words. They called it an attempted geopolitical power grab, comparing it to 21st century colonialism. The real bombshell came when it was revealed that accepting the deal would have meant giving U.S. forces access to intelligence networks and veto rights on Chinese infrastructure projects. The response was swift and sharp. Ghana said no, and in retaliation, the U.S. canceled visa privileges for top officials, a move viewed as a warning shot to the rest of the continent. But Ghana didn't back down. Instead, it doubled down on partnerships with the African Continental Free Trade Area and China's Belt and Road Initiative. What's remarkable is that the public stood behind the government's decision. Civic groups organized protests, demanding transparency and sovereignty in foreign policy. For many Ghanaians, this wasn't just about aid, it was about dignity. The rejection sent a clear message: Africa won't be strong-armed. Number 9. Nigeria, we won't sell our soul for oil. Nigeria, the continent's largest oil producer and most populous nation, was offered billions in energy tech and trade agreements. But the offer required handing over controlling stakes, over 50%, in its oil sector to U.S. corporations. In return, promises of infrastructure projects with vague timelines and limited local profit sharing. The Nigerian government, media, and public erupted in outrage. Politicians across party lines branded the proposal as economic colonization. The president's fiery rejection speech made global headlines. "We're not for sale," he said. "Not our oil, not our future." The backlash was a rare unifying moment in Nigeria's often fragmented political landscape. Editorials, student groups, labor unions all echoed the same sentiment. The deal was seen as a threat to national security and economic sovereignty. What's more, this move had ripple effects. Instead of isolating Nigeria, it galvanized new partnerships with Russia and Brazil. Nigeria's National Petroleum Corporation even entered a historic joint venture with a Chinese firm weeks after rejecting Trump's terms. U.S. threats of sanctions followed, but Nigeria remained unmoved. This bold stand by one of Africa's giants has sent a loud message. The continent is asserting control over its own natural wealth. For many African nations watching closely, Nigeria became the case study in how to say no and still come out stronger. South Africa bricks over bullies. South Africa, long considered a diplomatic bridge between the West and the global South, shocked the world when it declined a series of trade incentives tied to one massive ask: exit BRICS. The United States wanted South Africa out of its growing alliance with Brazil, Russia, India, and China. In exchange, it promised billions in trade perks and military tech. But the price, abandoning its geopolitical autonomy, was too high. President Ramaphosa was blunt. "We're not pawns. We won't be used to isolate our friends." Public rallies backed the stance, with chants demanding independence from Western coercion. When South Africa stood its ground, the United States retaliated with tariffs. American goods faced boycotts in return, and the nation's parliament passed a bill strengthening BRICS cooperation, effectively locking in their commitment. South Africa's stand reverberated beyond politics. Youth leaders hailed the decision as a turning point. University forums buzzed with discussions about sovereignty and economic freedom. BRICS nations responded with renewed trade deals, fast-tracked tech transfers, and new cultural exchanges. What's clear is that South Africa's rejection wasn't just political, it was symbolic. It declared that the era of non-alignment is over. Africa is choosing its partners freely, not under threat. And that shift is rewriting global diplomacy in real time. Ethiopia, no to the drone deal. Ethiopia found itself under immense pressure when Trump's administration proposed turning the country into a central hub for United States drone operations in East Africa. The proposal came with promises of defense cooperation, advanced military equipment, and hundreds of millions in security aid. But buried in the deal were troubling clauses: unrestricted United States access to Ethiopian airspace, autonomous military authority on the ground, and intelligence-sharing conditions that bordered on espionage. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed didn't hesitate. He issued a statement rejecting the proposal outright, citing Ethiopia's long history of self-reliance and neutrality in foreign conflicts. "We don't lease our sovereignty," he said, words that instantly trended across African media. The decision wasn't just political, it was strategic. Hosting a United States drone base would have risked Ethiopia being pulled into regional instability, making it a target for extremists and geopolitical retaliation, and the people knew it. Demonstrations broke out in Addis Ababa in support of the government's decision, with banners reading "No bases, no battles, no bosses." The United States response? Military aid was slashed by 40%, and negotiations on other fronts froze. But Ethiopia stood firm, deepening its military partnerships with Turkey and expanding its homegrown drone program. The message was loud and clear. African defense decisions must be made in Africa, not dictated from abroad. Kenya, we won't privatize our nation. Kenya was offered a $3 billion development package, but with terms that critics called neo-colonial. The Trump administration wanted control over Kenya's major infrastructure projects. Highways, ports, railways, everything would be privatized and handed to American firms. Even worse, the deal included clauses giving United States courts jurisdiction over economic disputes, overriding Kenyan legal authority. The proposal sparked an immediate political firestorm. Kenya's opposition leader called it economic occupation disguised as aid. Civil rights groups, legal scholars, and business leaders united in opposition. The phrase modern colonialism dominated headlines. President William Ruto, already cautious of increasing foreign debt, took a hard line. He canceled negotiations publicly, stating, "Our institutions are not for sale. Our laws are not negotiable." The United States Embassy issued a mild rebuke, calling the decision disappointing. But privately, Washington was shocked. Kenya had been seen as a reliable strategic partner. Instead of floundering, Kenya pivoted. Within weeks, it secured alternative funding from the African Development Bank and fast-tracked a tech collaboration deal with India. A major infrastructure partnership with South Korea followed. Kenya's decision wasn't just rejection, it was redirection. It showed that the country has options and that the global balance of investment power is shifting. Tanzania guinea pigs? Never. Tanzania's rejection of Trump's health aid package became one of the most controversial decisions on the continent. The United States offered state-of-the-art medical equipment, vaccine shipments, and millions in health funding. But only if Tanzania agreed to become a primary site for experimental pharmaceutical trials. These trials lacked proper oversight and had vague protocols on liability in case of adverse effects. President Samia Suluhu Hassan responded with measured outrage. "We're not guinea pigs for foreign labs," she declared. Her administration cited past medical ethics violations in African countries and demanded full transparency, long-term liability coverage, and equal partnerships in future vaccine development. When these demands were ignored, Tanzania walked away. Health advocates in the West criticized the move, but within Africa it was hailed as brave. Human rights groups praised Tanzania for standing up to exploitative deals dressed in humanitarian language. The fallout? Tanzania reinforced partnerships with Cuba and launched new public health investments backed by the African Union. The country also announced a new biotechnology center focused on producing indigenous vaccines and treatments. Tanzania's stand marked a turning point. It highlighted how Africa is no longer just a recipient of solutions, it's a player in creating them. Algeria. We don't spy on our neighbors. When the Trump administration approached Algeria with a lucrative counterterrorism package, drones, satellite access, and AI surveillance tools, it came with a non-negotiable clause. Algeria had to provide real-time intelligence on neighboring Libya, Mali, and Niger. To U.S. officials, this was strategic oversight. To Algeria, it was betrayal. President Abdelmajid Tebboune wasted no time. "We are not your informants," he said bluntly in a televised address. Algerian intelligence, known for its fierce independence, reportedly shredded the proposal within hours. The message? Algeria's role in the region would not be reduced to that of a proxy watchdog. This wasn't the first time Algeria had clashed with the West over sovereignty. The country maintains a strict policy of non-interference in regional conflicts, and has historically refused to align militarily with any global power bloc. The Trump proposal, viewed as an attempt to compromise this neutrality, was rejected not just by the government, but by the public. The aftermath was swift. U.S. surveillance cooperation was suspended, and high-level diplomatic visits were canceled. But Algeria didn't flinch. Instead, it accelerated its partnership with Russia on border security and opened a dialogue with the African Union about establishing a Pan-African cybersecurity unit. Algeria's stance reinforced a growing sentiment. Africa will not be used as a surveillance tool in someone else's power game. Senegal democracy is not for sale. Senegal's rejection hit particularly hard because it shattered a carefully planned U.S. diplomatic strategy. The Trump administration proposed millions in democratic aid, funding for elections, civil society groups, and judicial reform. But then came the leak. Internal documents revealed that the aid was tied to a covert campaign to promote a pro-Western candidate in Senegal's upcoming presidential election. When the papers went public, the backlash was immediate and fiery. President Macky Sall, in a rare move, summoned the U.S. ambassador and demanded a full explanation. Civil society groups erupted in protest. Activists marched through Dakar holding signs reading "Our democracy, our rules." The Senegalese government quickly expelled 2 American diplomats and banned several USAID programs under investigation for political interference. The fallout was diplomatic chaos. Washington denied the claims, but the damage was done. Senegal had just made an example of a superpower trying to play kingmaker. In the aftermath, Senegal launched an independent electoral transparency commission and deepened its election security partnership with the European Union and ECOWAS. The incident became a case study in the Global South's growing demand for respect, not manipulation. Senegal's stance was clear. Democracy built under pressure isn't democracy at all. Angola, show us the money first. Trump's administration promised Angola a breathtaking $5 billion in infrastructure projects, roads, energy grids, and a tech hub in Luanda. But the fine print told a different story. The investments were actually debt, high-interest loans conditional on one thing. Angola had to drop its existing trade deals with China and hand over exploration rights to American firms. President João Lourenço wasn't amused. In a press conference that quickly went viral, he quipped, "If you want exclusivity, show us the money first." The U.S. couldn't guarantee the funding up front. What Angola saw was a classic bait-and-switch empty promises packaged as economic liberation, the real sticking point. Washington wanted control over Angola's rich oil fields and rare earth minerals, assets China had been helping develop for years. The Trump administration's offer looked more like a strategic blockade than a partnership. Angola walked away, then signed a $3.7 billion infrastructure and mining deal with China the next week. This wasn't just a rejection, it was a pivot. Angola made it clear. Development isn't a zero-sum game, and the US no longer gets to dictate who Africa does business with. The biggest blow came from Egypt, America's most long-standing military partner in Africa. For decades, the US had funneled over $1 billion a year into Egypt's military. So when Trump floated a new security pact, Washington expected loyalty. Instead, they got a shock. The New Deal demanded Egypt publicly support Israel's annexation of the West Bank, an impossible ask for President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. Supporting such a move would spark massive unrest at home and wreck Egypt's credibility in the Arab world. The Trump administration threatened to pull $1.3 billion in military aid. Sisi didn't blink. "We are not for sale," he reportedly told a senior U.S. envoy. Egypt rejected the deal, refused to condemn Palestine, and went one step further. It reached out to China and Russia for alternative military agreements. Egypt's message was thunderous and final. The U.S. backed down. In doing so, Egypt redefined what even loyal allies were willing to tolerate. The fallout has since sparked a quiet realignment of global military partnerships across Africa. Egypt proved that not even a billion-dollar relationship guarantees obedience. Africa just sent a message to the world's most powerful nation, and it echoed loud. These 10 countries didn't just say no to Trump, they said no to being controlled, manipulated, and bought off. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Which country made the boldest move? And do you think the West will back down or double down? Smash that like button if you believe Africa deserves to lead its own future. Subscribe for more stories they don't want you to hear. Hit that bell, because what's coming next could rewrite global power as we know it.